Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, the Phillies have extended non-roster spring training invites. Who are the important ones who got them, and what are the big position battles? We'll break it down.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work. I've been doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for 5 years, covering all the Philly teams. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and this is my 4th year now as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that if you're listening to this in podcast form, you're rating and reviewing. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching us on the YouTube, or you're yet to subscribe to the Locked On Phillies channel, go to that channel, hit that subscribe button. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's free. It's easy. It helps you out. It also really helps me out. So if you like the content, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase with GameTime. So the Phillies have extended their non-roster invites to Major League Camp. And while spring training on a day like today, where it's freezing outside in Philadelphia, it might feel forever away, it's something that we need to break down because the news came out and we got to start looking forward to it and get an idea of what's going to happen. This should be a good sign of like, okay, baseball's closer than it might feel currently based on the weather. After we go through who some of the big names are that the Phillies extended invites to, we're going to talk about what position battles would still be open in camp, things that still need to be worked out like that. And there's only a handful. And then we're going to round out with the off the poll question and the responses and results to that. Now, full credit to Matt Gelb, who covers the Phillies for The Athletic. I'm going to be referencing an article of his in The Athletic a lot during today's episode, just for like the list of players and stuff like that. I talk about Matt's work a lot on the podcast because I think he does an amazing job covering the team. So if you have an Athletic subscription or if you want to follow the Phillies even closer, go ahead and check out Matt Gelb's stuff, man. He does an amazing job. So the Phillies extended roster invites. So how spring training works is the guys on the 40-man go, but then you also have to, or I guess, the guys on the 40-man go, and you have to extend invites to other guys that are not technically there or maybe not on the Major League roster or anything like that. Non-roster invitees, you get like 20-some, and the Philadelphia Phillies have went and gave some invites out to some big-name players. So we'll start with the guys you need to know. Who are the big names to watch in spring training that are not returning major leaguers? The first one is obviously Andrew Painter. Now, Andrew Painter is in a very interesting situation. We've talked about this in passing before on the podcast, but he's not pitching in spring training, at least against other teams. They are not throwing him in games. So if you're going down, you're buying tickets to a game down there in Clearwater, you're going to hang out at Frenchie's, you're going to say, it's going to be great, I'm going to watch Andrew Painter pitch. No, you won't. Now, the cool thing about Phillies spring training is you can watch practice, and he'll be throwing bullpens. He'll be throwing live sessions to teammates, but the Phillies just want super control over what Andrew Painter is going to do in the spring because they don't want to up any innings. They don't want to put unnecessary stress. They don't want to put a lot of pressure on him and make him go all out to say, hey, you're going to try and make the team out of camp and then risk re-injury as he continues to recover from Tommy John. Dave Dombrowski said it was like July-ish is the aiming point for Andrew Painter to make his debut at the Major League level. So we're going to see him at the Major League level this year, right? We're going to do that. I promise you. But you're not going to see him at spring training. And part of that is the Phillies being overly cautious with the rehab from injury. But that's the biggest thing is to just hear what they're saying about Andrew Painter. He is their most important prospect for this year's spring training. Now, there are some guys in the Major League bullpen that are really good that you found as minor league contract guys. Jeff Hoffman, who just signed with the Blue Jays, was one of them. Jose Ruiz was one of them. They've got some guys that are invited with big league experience from the bullpen. We're going to talk about position battles, but bullpen is one of them. We're going to mention bullpen multiple times, especially when we get to the off the poll question in our final segment. But some names you should remember, like Jose Quaz, should know that name. He's had major league time with the Phillies. Some of these other names are like, you probably never heard of them, like Nabil Crismat, Joel Kuhnel, John McMillan, Nicholas Padilla, Nick Vespi. Like, these are guys that if you're a Phillies fan, even to like a heavy, heavy degree, you probably don't know who these guys are. And that's because they're mostly journeyman major leaguers. Now, could one of these guys be someone who turns into a Jeff Hoffman? Probably not. You're probably not getting an all-star caliber future $30-something million free agency contract guy out of this. But you need depth in case injuries happen. So these are guys that you're going to look at. And the Phillies are going to more evaluate and say, well, if one of our guys in the bullpen goes down, who's our hierarchy of guys that will be in AAA that we'll call up? So no one really of note as far as arms outside of Andrew Painter. But there are two very, very interesting position player prospects that you're going to keep an eye on. Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford, both get the invite to big league camp, and that is great. Now, Aiden Miller's not making the team. Before anyone's like, is he going to start over Bohm? Are they going to make that? Aiden Miller's not going to make the team out of spring training. It's just not going to happen, right? And Justin Crawford isn't either, for that matter. Both of these guys are not ready. They're not at that point in their progression yet where they're going to be major league ball players this year. At least from the Phillies' perspective, especially for a competitive team. If this was White Sox spring training, they could make the team. If this was Miami Marlins spring training, they could make the team. For the Philadelphia Phillies, who are going to be competing for a World Series once again, these guys aren't competing for a roster spot. But what they're doing is they're getting their first taste of big league camp. And then they're also going to get a chance to show some fans what they can do. And, of course, more importantly, the Phillies organization. But everyone's been hearing the name Aiden Miller, and you see the numbers. And maybe once in a while, you'll come across like a social media highlight of him hitting a bomb or something. Well, you get the chance to actually see him, watch him, face not major league pitching most times, but face guys that are in big league camp for other teams. The same goes for Justin Crawford. And these guys are really, really cool because Aiden Miller is potentially the future at third base. He's been playing shortstop coming up, but I think he's a third baseman. We'll see where he plays in spring training. That'll be really interesting. Justin Crawford, talented outfield prospect. He's a guy that is the future of the Philadelphia Phillies outfield as things stand right now. But the question is, well, the Phillies haven't been able to evaluate outfielders well. They haven't had guys progress. They haven't had these like all-star caliber homegrown outfielders. Like, that doesn't happen here in Philadelphia. So if you're worried that, well, yeah, Justin Crawford looks great, but is he more of the same? Can this organization develop outfielders? You'll get a chance to look at a guy who's still a raw player, but freakishly athletic, really talented, strong at the dish. Like, he is a guy that is a future Major League Baseball player. I can tell you that. Justin Crawford is a future Major League Baseball player. Both of these guys are probably going to be, I don't know, like AA, maybe breaking into AAA at some point this year. But they're guys to watch for spring training because they're names you've heard, and this is like the pre-game for them. Next year will be the time where you start to, when Nick Castellanos' contract is up, and you got to figure out what you're doing with center field and what Max Kepler looks like this year and everything. There's going to be a lot of open spots in the outfield next year. Maybe Justin Crawford. There's going to be potentially an open spot in the infield. Who knows when, depending on what goes on with this Alec Bohm situation. Maybe Aiden Miller. Like, they're the future, but they're not the right now. So it's more of a fun, like, oh, this guy, that's a cool play. That's a great moment. I see flashes from him. I'm excited that the future is bright for the Philadelphia Phillies because there have been times where the farm system has given you absolutely nothing. In the past, like 10 to 15 years of Philadelphia Phillies fandom, there have been more times where the farm system is bad than the farm system is good. And it's nice to know that you have two big-name prospects that you're going to get a chance to see some action from in spring training. I mean, outside of that, there aren't really any big-time names to focus on. Those are really the big ones, unless you're like still in on the Griff McGarry train. Griff McGarry got an invite, but the Phillies allowed him to be available during the Rule 5 draft, and he was not selected. So that just shows you no other team was willing to put him on their 40-man by using a Rule 5 draft pick on him. So he hasn't progressed the same way. Maybe he shows something. Maybe he gets the opportunity. I mean, the talent was there, but listen, when you draft prep pitchers you got to go ahead and give them time to develop, and you're taking a gamble more than if you're like, I don't know, drafting a guy that played 3 years of college ball or whatever. So we'll see what Griff McGarry does, but that's not like one of those highlight names. He is man, maybe this guy will work out. Maybe he will play out for the Philadelphia Phillies at some point. It seems less and less likely by the day. It's just a name you'll remember because Mick Abel and Griff McGarry and Andrew Painter are guys that you should remember their names of the pitching prospect first-round picks that the Phillies have gone after. So not anything crazy, which is what you'd expect because while the Phillies are really, really good at the major league level, that does come with a bit of a depletion of the farm system, or you focus more on focus on winning a World Series. And like they're not rebuilding, they're not trading major league players for all these high level prospects. If anything, they're adding prospects to deals like they did with the Jesus Luzardo trade, or like they do at the deadline during these years where they're competing. So a minimal list of interesting names for the non-roster invitees, but still a couple to keep an eye on. Painter, Crawford, Miller, and I'm going to throw McGarry in there too, just because I'm kind of interested to see if this kid gets an opportunity in camp, if he shows flashes of the guy that the Phillies thought he could be a couple years ago. So with spring training in mind and with the players who are going to be there broken down, you might notice something about all of those guys. I said Painter's not going to make the team out of camp. Crawford's not going to make the team out of camp. Miller's not going to make the team out of camp. And McGarry is not going to make the team out of camp. I mean, all of those guys are not going to make the team out of camp. So what are the position battles that are even going on? What even needs to be figured out by the Philadelphia Phillies? Are there positions up for grabs? We'll take a look at where things stand now while we have spring training on our mind for the upcoming camp. And if there's any way to break into the Philadelphia Phillies opening day roster, where's it going to be? And who's it going to be for? We'll discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about game time first, though, because you're just like me. We love going to live events. They're amazing. Being there in person is so much better than watching something on TV. Listening to an album in your living room, hearing the jokes told on like a YouTube special or something. Like, no, you want to be in the crowd for comedy and concerts and theater and sports, of course. It's an unforgettable experience, and Game Time can help you with it. They've now made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was a little ambitious. I was looking at tickets for last week's wild card round. The Eagles were in at Lincoln Financial Field, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to blow the money right now because they're going to be playing all the way through the postseason. Well, this may be your last chance to watch the Philadelphia Eagles at home this coming Sunday. Game Time can get you in the building. Go ahead and check out Game Time for those Eagles-Rams tickets. They got them there. They got great deals. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? You know it. It's game time. All right, so let's discuss the positional battles that could potentially happen in camp. The ones that seem like they're up for grabs. Not many. There's a chance that there are only 2 spots available for, well, there could be a chance there's only 1 spot available. Let's just break this down. There are 3 maybes. There's 1 definite, and then you got to figure out like how you evaluate the other 2. The 3 spots that could potentially shift around. We've talked multiple times in recent episodes about the bullpen. There is 1 more spot that is up for grabs in the bullpen. It seems like 7 spots are locked down. Ruiz, Banks, Romano, Alvarado, Strom, Kerkering, and I'm missing one, and I always miss one. How do I always miss one? And Joe Ross. I keep forgetting Joe Ross. I'll remember Joe Ross's name eventually, one of these times, once I see him in a Phillies uniform. Those are the 7 guys, though, that have currently pretty much locked down spots in the Phillies bullpen. They're all in major league contracts. They're all going to be with the team. They're all really good pitchers. So you have 1 spot in the bullpen as of right now. Now, we're on January, whatever date it is, 14th, 15th, whatever today. I don't know. You lose track of the days this time of year. There's a lot of time between now and spring training, over a month. So I look at that and I say, yeah, you could absolutely make a move for a bullpen arm between now and then that would lock that up. And let's say it's bringing back Carlos Estevez. Let's say it's going and getting Tanner Scott. Let's say it's a big-time bullpen move. Well, none of the bullpen arms with like some major league experience that were like journeymen, like we were talking about in our first segment, are going to probably upstage any of those guys. Like most likely, that would mean that that final spot in the bullpen is gone. So if the Phillies sign somebody major, there probably is no more bullpen battle. If they don't, well, you're going to have to find somebody to fill in that 8th spot in the bullpen. I'd rather they do sign somebody, because you heard some of those names that are options. They don't really sound great. They don't inspire a lot of confidence as far as being part of an elite major league bullpen. Being a major league bullpen pitcher at some point, yeah, sure, for sure. And some of these guys, like there's a guy they're going to have in camp that had some time with the Dodgers, and a guy that has like 100 major league innings. Like they got guys with experience coming in, but they're not talented to the level that you'll probably need them to be to compete for a World Series if they're in your bullpen on opening day. So sign somebody, clear that up. We'll talk more about this in Off the Poll because a lot of people agree with that. But if they don't, that's one of the spots there could be a positional battle. Another spot would be in the outfield. Now, center field is technically a position battle because it could be Rojas, it could be Marsh, but it's not a, hey, somebody from the minors could go ahead and win this spot and it's open and everything. I mean, I guess that's a guaranteed position battle too. So we'll call it 2 guarantees. One maybe. If they sign somebody for the bullpen, which seems possible, then that's not one. But center field, whether they sign another outfielder or not, there is going to be a situation where Rojas and Marsh fight for the center field spot, not physically fight. I'd take probably Brandon Marsh in that one. That dude is crazy. But I'll also probably take Brandon Marsh in the center field hierarchy as far as likelihood to win the position, but the Phillies will give Rojas his opportunity, just like they did last year. Marsh broke camp as the guy, and then you kind of – wait, did Marsh break camp as the guy, or was Marsh the left fielder? All these seasons run together. Bottom line is Marsh is the guy that they like better. Rojas will have to fight an uphill battle to be the starting center fielder for the Phillies. I don't see it as likely. Things can change. We talked about him getting the Dominican Winter League Rookie of the Year award. So, hey, maybe this is Rojas's breakout year as a Major League Baseball player. We'll see. But that's the other position. I don't think it's likely they bring somebody in to play center field at this point in the offseason. Like, I don't think that's the thing that's going to happen. So it's between those two, and there's nobody in the minor leagues. Like, if you're saying, well, why doesn't Justin Crawford get a chance? He's too young. He's not there yet. He's not ready to play center field on a World Series contending team. It's going to be one of those two guys, Rojas or Marsh. So that is a position battle. We'll see how that plays out. Now, the stakes are low because whoever doesn't start is going to be your number one outfield replacement, and that's going to mean that you've got, and when we talk about position battles, I'm talking about starters. We're not talking roster battles yet, by the way, because you might be saying, well, who's your backup outfielder? Is it Weston Wilson? Is it Cal Stevenson? Those guys are going to have to go back. I get it. We'll dive into the margins as we get a little closer. That's not something that I want to get too deep into right now because, frankly, it's too in the weeds for this conversation that we're having. I'm more focused on the starters, the guys who are going to be playing 100-plus games for this team. It'll be between Marsh and Rojas. And the one that is also a guarantee that there's going to be a battle for is what we talked about with the backup catcher position. It seems very evident the Phillies are not interested in adding a catcher at free agency, which means backing up JT Realmuto is going to either be Garrett Stubbs, who it has been for the past couple seasons, or it's going to be Rafael Marchand, who stepped up and had opportunities this past year with JT Realmuto going down to split time with Stubbs. He looked really good at points. Offensively, he is clearly more adept at hitting the baseball than Garrett Stubbs. So we'll see if the defense is a spot where they trust him. Then it's not going to be both of these guys. Like when JT went down and they were both at the major league level, it's like, we'll split time. They're not going to carry 3 catchers. So either Marchand's going to be a AAA or Stubbs is going to be a AAA. I believe the inside track is going to be given to Garrett Stubbs because he is the guy that's been here. He's the guy that's comfortable in that locker room. He's the guy that all the guys love. He is a clubhouse guy through and through. People roll their eyes at that, but upsetting the status quo in a clubhouse that has been so strong like the Philadelphia Phillies is not something that people love to do unless there is a clear advantage by the other guy at the position. So I think Stubbs is going to get like the slight advantage, maybe like a 55-45 lean to start this contest. But Marchand could absolutely win this position. They're going to give him a lot of opportunity to win a spot as the backup catcher of the Philadelphia Phillies. He would be my pick. I'm telling you that starting the battle, I think Stubbs has a little bit of the advantage just because he's been that guy already. But, I mean, Marchand is just – he is the – I think he is the better backup catcher. Like I do. I firmly believe that. I'm not going to say like he's the lock better backup catcher because we just don't have enough of a sample size at the major league level. And you might say, well, Stubbs is stunk at the major league level. That doesn't mean there aren't other guys that also are not good, right? Like Stubbs has had his moments defensively. But just because Stubbs isn't JT doesn't mean everybody else is also JT or Remuto. You got to see if Marchand can hold his own in Major League camp and present like he's going to be a certifiable backup catcher at the Major League level, because whoever it's going to be is going to have to play more this season than a backup catcher behind JT Remuto probably ever has in his career. So we'll see how that plays out. But of those three, I gave you my predictions. I think it's going to be a signing in the bullpen. So I don't think the guy that's going to hold that 8th spot in the bullpen is on the roster currently. I think it's going to be Brandon Marsh in center field with Rojas as a depth option. And I would guess right now, my prediction would be that it's going to be Rafael Marchand as the backup catcher. The reason you might be saying, well, Connor, why are you saying that Stubbs has the inside track then? Again, there's always like heading into the camp, there's a guy you're going to give more opportunities to. It's impossible to split the reps right down the middle, 50-50. I mean, I guess it is possible, but it's not like realistic to expect the team to exactly do that, especially when you've had a guy that's been in that position for a couple of years. But I expect Marchand at the end of the day to be the guy that gets that spot. And you see, there's not that much positionally that's going to change. Starting catcher's locked down. First base is locked down. Second base locked down. Shortstop's locked down. Third base locked down. Left field locked down. Right field locked down. Center field between two guys. Bullpen, 7 spots locked down. Rotation, 5 spots locked down. Yes, that's the other thing. If you think Taijuan Walker or Andrew Painter or anybody is competing for a spot in this rotation in spring training, you are kidding yourselves. There is no way that Taijuan Walker cracks the rotation of Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo. It's not going to happen. He doesn't hold the candle to any of those guys. He'll be in camp because the Phillies will see what he has. I'd be surprised if Taijuan Walker is on the major league lot. No, sorry. Backtrack. I would be flabbergasted. I needed to use a stronger word because I don't see it as possible, not likely, possible that Taijuan Walker makes this team out of camp. So the rotation's locked down. 99.9% of the bullpen is locked down. A lot of the starting positions are locked down. And like I said, we're not going to go too deep into like the extra outfielder or the extra infielder. We know Edmundo Sosa is going to be the utility guy. There's not that much to figure out in spring training. And while some people feel like that's running it back, I mean, there is something to be said for consistency as well. And also, this is something that we've seen the past couple of years from the Phillies where there's just not that much to figure out in camp. It doesn't mean we won't be excited to watch play baseball in Clearwater. It just means that there isn't really too much to figure out as far as high stakes, who makes this, who makes what. But there aren't normally a lot of World Series teams where you head into spring training and say, hey, we don't have a clear front runner at an important position. Like, for all the people who are mad, oh, well, the Phillies are running it back, and that's why they don't have competition for positions and everything like that. The great teams don't, man. You think the Dodgers are rolling into their camp trying to figure out who's going to be starting at first base for them? No, it's Freddie Freeman. Like, they have major set guys at positions basically across the board. And I don't think anyone's complaining about them running it back now they won the World Series. But the point is, if you're a great team, you have great players. If you're a great player, there's a big gap between you and the other players on the roster. If there's a big gap, that means the spring training is a little bit less important for those teams because there's less to evaluate. Coming up next, I asked you guys to evaluate something, though. I asked you a question about what's more likely. Is it more likely the Phillies add to the outfield or to the bullpen? I think you got an idea throughout this episode of where I'm leaning, but we'll see if the fan base agrees. And I'll kind of break down why I think the thoughts are where they are as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, so we had off the poll. Thank you to everybody who chimed in and casted your votes. If you want to, next time we do this, you got to go to @ConnorThomas975 on Twitter or go to @LO_Phillies on Twitter. Both of those accounts will have the the off the poll question. And this week, I'll read it for you verbatim. What's more likely, the Phillies add more outfield help or more bullpen help in free agency? Remember, this is in free agency, so this doesn't account for, like, if the Phillies were to trade Alec Bohm for a big-time center fielder somehow. Like, I don't even know how realistic that is. But, like, if they were to trade him for outfield help, that's not what I'm saying, like, forced into it by moving another player. I'm saying if you sign somebody in free agency, is it more likely that they pitch or that they play the outfield? And pretty overwhelming response to this one. 69% of responders are saying that more bullpen help is the more likely thing. And I completely agree with you. Completely, because there is a bona fide clear spot in the bullpen that still needs filling. The outfield, we talked about it. Like, there's not really anyone to add. I will kind of have a conversation at some point as we get close to the camp. We're going to have to talk about Max Kepler in left field, because I know what Nick Castellanos is in right field. I know the upsides. I know the downsides. I know all of that. I know what Brandon Marsh and Yohan Rojas can probably be in center field. Whoever gets that position, we've seen them here for a couple of years. We know who those players are. We know what those players bring. We know their baseline. We know their ceiling. We know everything about these guys in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform. Kepler's the new dude. And if you're not adding anything, well, there's not really a great backup outfield option, right? Rojas could fill in for one of these guys if they need a rest, but he is a minus when it comes to a bat. So you'll see how that works out, or at least he is a minus right now. My point is this. Nick Castellanos played 162 games last year. He's probably not going to play all 162 again. I'm sure he'd like to. That'd be cool if he did. It would also be very helpful if he did. But if he doesn't play in the outfield, it's going to be Weston Wilson or Cody Clemens, or it's going to be Cal Stevenson. One of these guys is going to have to go in. None of those guys are true, like, major league starting caliber players right now. I don't think, at least. Left field's the same thing. And Kepler's had injury issues at points in his career. If he goes down, you got maybe, like, I don't know, let's say he goes down for 3 weeks. You got 15 games or more of Cal Stevenson or Weston Wilson or Cody Clemens playing the outfield. Like, that's not a really sustainable option for the Philadelphia Phillies. And that's why that outfield spot is so important. But I don't think you're not going to add anything. You're not going to sign another guy over Kepler, who you signed to replace Austin Hayes. So he is the guy in left field. And if he's the guy in left field, well, we need to really evaluate how ready is he going to be a major impact out there, or is the outfield going to be a deficiency again? So that's something we'll have to highlight. But all of this is to say, as much as I think the outfield is still a weak spot for the Phillies, there's not really an opening to add. Bullpen's super easy. Sign a guy, put him in that final spot in the bullpen, lock everybody down. We are chilling. It makes sense. In the outfield, you'd have to then remove one of the guys you're planning on having on your roster. You would have to figure out how it fits defensively. You would have to talk to Marsh and Rojas, two young players who the Phillies organization still thinks are part of their plans, and say, yo, we're bringing in somebody to take your spot, and you guys are both going to the bench. Now, your depth would get significantly better. But I don't know who that player is that would increase your starting caliber in the outfield. I just don't think that guy is a realistic add right now for the Philadelphia Phillies. At some point, when we do that Kepler episode, we're also going to look at the big-time free agent outfielders available to see if there's anyone we're missing. We did it with catcher and realized there was nobody really all that good out there anymore. But, yeah, the bullpen, I completely agree with all the responders. I think you're spot on. It's more likely that they add a bullpen arm in free agency. In fact, I would say that there is a greater than 75% chance that the Philadelphia Phillies make a notable major league bullpen signing. Now, it might not be Estevez. It might not be Tanner Scott. It might not be like one of these all-star caliber guys, but like a name that you recognize from Major League Baseball to add to their bullpen before spring training. I think it's a greater than 75% chance they do that. And the poll is only a 69% chance. So we should probably up those numbers even, well, at least compared to adding to the outfield. But thank you to everyone who responded to that. We are in lockstep with the responses and with what I think. And listen, things are starting to take shape a lot more for the Philadelphia Phillies as we move forward through the offseason. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Day off tomorrow, so I'll talk to you all again Friday. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, always, you know this. And please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. If you're watching us on the YouTube, hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel. I appreciate everyone doing that. And, wow, I mean, that's it. This episode flew by. So I'll talk to you Friday on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.